Did you know Super Awesome Mix has an app? Go to the Apple App Store today and download Super Awesome Mix. It's free. You could start creating and sending your own digital mixtapes in just a few clicks. Also, there's links to our Instagram account and a link where you can follow your favorite podcast. Speaking of which, welcome back to another Super Awesome Mix. My name is Matt Sidholm, alongside my co-host and co-founder of Super Awesome Mix, Samer Abu Salbi. Samer, how are we doing this week?
I am doing real well. You know, it's always a good week whenever I feel that you understood the assignment, and you really understood the assignment this time. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, we're doing a new format on this week's show, something a little different, and we've got a few different formats on this show. Obviously, we do the new music. We've done a couple desert island mixes. We did our first countdown mix a few weeks back, but this week what we're trying, and this was one of your ideas, but we're doing a kind of intro to a band mix.
Yes, exactly. So we always do the 12 songs. So that part never changes. So you're getting 12 songs on a mixtape, which is always fun and a challenge, right? That's like the whole thing. No one really wants a 500 song playlist. But yeah, we thought, you know what, at least from my experience, and maybe you're like me, there are bands out there that have been out there for a while, and they have a huge discography. And it's like, wow, I kind of missed the boat on that. And if I want to get back into them, I don't know where to begin. And some, services like Spotify and Apple Music have essentials or introduction to, but it's always kind of better to have someone who grew up listening to it or really are into the band to kind of point you in a direction, and not necessarily just popular songs or most, listened to. So with that, this week was an introduction to Pearl Jam. So Matt will be introducing his kind of journey of Pearl Jam, listening and growing up listening to Pearl Jam to me, because that is a group that I've always felt like I should love and just felt so intimidated by the fact that they've been around over 30 years and I'm still I don't really know where to listen or where to start.
Yeah, I remember you said on one of the shows that you kind of only recently discovered some of their music, mm-hmm. and that kind of blew me away because, as I'll talk about, I mean, it was pretty much freshman year of high school for me when they kind of, their first album, 10, came out. And they've just been massive, my entire life. So throughout high school and college and then, thereafter. But then, and obviously you're about 10 years younger than me. So, for the listeners out there, obviously that's going to make a difference. Okay. So for me, it was obviously a really different experience with Pearl Jam than, like you said. I mean, you came in kind of well after the fact that this is just a band that is out there and sort of well established, in the same way that when I was growing up, the Rolling Stones always existed, right? But I never had this experience with them where it's they were kind of an unknown and then sort of came to be. So so we thought this would be a really good way to start, and just a ton of good music to choose from. I will tell if there are diehard Pearl Jam listeners out there, I'll tell you, this is an introduction mix. So it was real heavy on the first 3 albums because there were so many big hits off of that. And I think if I was introducing to someone, which I am, that's the whole point of this, I would go heavy on those albums. And then at the end, I put a few tracks from some of their more recent stuff.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think you really understood the assignment because I was jamming out to this mix. Oh my God, I just was jamming out. No, I'm not going to make that joke, even though I already did. But yes, really enjoyed this mix a whole lot. So with that, let's kick it off. So the first pick that you chose on this mix is Jeremy.
Yeah, so the first 4 tracks from this mix, and this was really hard, is that their first album was called 10. And I ended up picking 4 tracks from it because I think they were all kind of indicative of, the band. And I picked Jeremy first. Now, interesting side note. So Pearl Jam, 4 core members, right? Eddie Vedder, of course. He's the lead singer and guitarist. Okay, Jeff Ament, Stone Gossard, Mike McCready. Okay, Jeff Ament's the bassist. Stone Gossard and Mike McCready are guitarists. And then eventually, it wasn't until 1998 that they settled on a drummer. And Matt Cameron has been the drummer for Pearl Jam since then. But prior to that, it was almost like Spinal Tap in that the drummer would sort of change out periodically for Pearl Jam. Didn't affect the band too much, but yeah, they didn't have a stable position there. But yeah, so ended up picking Jeremy from the album 10, and this song is based on a true story, and it was actually here. I live in Dallas, and it was just in Plano, Texas, a story about a high school kid who comes into his classroom one day and shoots himself in front of the class, like kills himself. And, for me, this comes out, I'm like 13, 14 years old. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is a true story. And I kind of heard about it in the news, but like when you're that young, like how much are you really watching the news? And this is pre-internet, so it's not like you're just going to see stuff about it everywhere the way you would things now. So, it was kind of like a familiar story, but then just to hear this, and I think this was the song, and the music video is pretty impactful too. And so this is always the song I think of first when I think of Pearl Jam, because it was like they wrote this song about it. And obviously nowadays, unfortunately, there's still news of school shootings, but it's students coming in and shooting other students. And in this case, it was this really shocking event in the news that they wrote about. And it was a student shooting himself. And it was because of, the ridicule and the pain that he was going through at that point in time. So, song, it just really resonated with you. It's a really powerful song. And for me, at that point in time in my life, it obviously resonated quite a bit. So this is always the first song I think of when I think of Pearl Jam.
Yeah, I had heard this song before, like loosely. I'm sure it got a lot of radio time. So at some point in my life, I'd come across it. I recognized the chorus a lot. But I had never known any of that. And so in my own research of this, I was like, oh my goodness, this is like really tragic. What a horrifying like news event that I'd never known. Like you said, I was really young at the point that this had happened. And the news is just endless, right? So never really caught up to it. But yeah, what a really sad story. But wow, it like completely changes the meaning of this song. The one verse that I really thought was so powerful given that context is that he, writes here, the best revenge is to live on and prove yourself, be stronger than those people, and then you can come back. He like says that about the song in the sense that like, don't take it out on people by removing yourself from the equation. Like show them by putting more into your life or, whatever it is. And of course, bullying is really complicated. But I just thought that was like a really powerful message of like, you are the one losing, sadly. It's not everyone else that's losing. Anyway, everyone loses. It's rough, but I had no idea that any of this was happening, and didn't know that was what the song was about. So very strong opener, and very, very good song musically too. Like really, it opens up the rest of the mix for sure.
Yeah, I think it's indicative of their sound that carries on, even to this day. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, really, as you'll find out if you read the lyrics of a lot of their songs, it doesn't always match the energy that maybe the song is bringing with it. And so that is kind of something I thought was appropriate too with this song, is that, they're a great rock band, but when you dig into some of these lyrics, it's like, oh, this is kind of a sad song, or this song is about this, and not to... they don't bum people out with it, right? But the message, there is a more powerful message there in a lot of their lyrics. So definitely worth noting there.
So track 2, you went, like we said, off of the 10 album still, and it is the track Even Flow.
Yeah, so you talk about not understanding the lyrics, right? Like this was one that was just classic, just a high energy type of song. And I remember, Adam Sandler, when he was on Saturday Night Live, kind of doing an impression of this and just doing nothing but gibberish. Because if you're trying to listen to Eddie Vedder on this track, like and sing along, it's really hard to do. But again, like it's one of those things when I finally sat down with the lyrics and read them and then revisited them as I'm preparing for this. and Eddie Vedder's talked about this. It's kind of about homelessness and some of the, challenges that people face there. Like someone even struggling beyond just, hey, I'm short on money, I'm living on the streets, right? There ends up being a mental illness aspect to this that they touch on. Like thoughts arrive like butterflies. They mention that in the lyrics, and then he chases them away. And so they kind of paint this picture of someone who, is kind of in their own head because of their given situation, or vice versa. Like, whatever. We're not going to comment. We're not here to comment on all that. But really kind of a sadder song, and it's something he would point out in concerts is just, some of the people out there who are suffering, and that's what this song's about.
Yeah. Right. Again, as you said, there's definitely a theme of what the song sounds like and then what happens when you listen to the lyrics, because the song is like this incredible rock song. I mean, I think they all are. The guitar solo in the middle is unbelievable. Like the drums in this song are also really, really good. This was one of the ones where, I found myself turning it up as I was listening to it, because especially in the guitar solo part, like just unbelievable guitar play. Eddie Vedder, of course, like, one of the greats in that regard. But yeah, I, thought it was, again, a very powerful song. And like you said, that's something that I also kept coming back to. I was like, wow, not only are these really powerful rock songs, but lyrically, yeah, they're all really interesting. They all kind of touch on something. They have that kind of storytelling element to each one, which is, makes sense that you grew up listening to them and really liking them, because if you're a longtime listener, we know that Matt loves a good story being told in a song, like many people. So this definitely checks that box. But on to track 3, again, off of the 10 album, and this is the track Black.
So, funny thing about the 10 album before we get into Black. Okay, so their original band name, they're fans of the NBA, especially Jeff Ament, the bassist, and their original band name was Mookie Blaylock, which was the name of a point guard for the Atlanta Hawks. In like the late 80s, early 90s. And they realized, like, as they went along, like, they were just using this guy's name as their band name. It was kind of weird because not all their fans were necessarily NBA fans. So it's like it held no meaning for them. So they changed it. They eventually landed on Pearl Jam, and they named their first album 10 because that was Mookie Blaylock's number, his jersey number. So funny little story about that. So this one, a little different energy-wise, right? Like it's a little slower, and this one is just more of like a straightforward kind of relationship song. And specifically, Eddie Vedder's always said this is about like a first relationship and how that heartbreak can hurt you. And I think this is where you really see, and not that you don't see the power in Eddie Vedder's voice in all their music, but when he slows it down, I think this is when you really see it, especially at the end of this song. When he's talking about, I hope someday you have a beautiful life, but why can't it be mine? And just sort of that longing. And so I think this really, it's an amazing song.
Agreed. Yeah, I wrote that exact same thing. I was like, his voice is perfect for this kind of reflection on loss. It's specifically a very powerful ending to the song that I absolutely adored. Yeah, like it's funny. I was reading that he didn't want this to be released as a single because he felt it like such a personal and like fragile song. I believe he used the word fragile, and he said that like fragile songs get just completely obliterated by the music business. So they had originally planned to like make this a single, or someone was pushing for it, and he refused. And despite it not even being single off the album, like you said, it's just like a huge track. And I think, again, it just speaks to the power of like what he's singing about and how relatable it can be. And, funny enough, like I listened to this mix primarily on a day when it was, it's fall here, or starting to be fall, getting close to it. And so it's kind of like a cold and rainy, like cold front day. And like, this is a perfect mix for that type of mood. I think it'd be like really tough to kind of listen to this when it's like sun shining and beautiful out, and like you just want to go frolic in the park or something. But right. Having it be cold and rainy, you're like very introspective and reflective, and it's perfect. And he lands that mood like really, really well. So that was another element of why I really enjoyed listening to this mix, is because it like really matched what was going on in the world, and I love when that happens. So on to track 4, last one off the album, and it is one that I was really familiar with. So this is one that I knew right off the bat, and it is Alive.
Okay, so this was a really personal song for Eddie Vedder because the story that he lays out here is that the character, which I mean it resonates really closely with Eddie Vedder. The character finds out that the person he knows as his father was actually a stepfather, and his father had passed away. Now, he throws this middle verse in here where it kind of implies there's this sort of incestuous relationship with his mother that results from this kind of weird family setup he has. And then in the third verse, it's kind of like he's still alive. Like throughout, I'm still alive is that, kind of overriding refrain. And, the way he presents it in the third verse is that it's almost this curse. Like he has to live with this. Right? All this horrible thing that's happened to him. And so, but when you hear the song, right? And again, it's kind of a running theme with some Pearl Jam songs. There's so much energy here. And at concerts, people were just using this as some sort of like empowering anthem. You talked about when you were talking about Jeremy, how, the way to get back at people is to just survive, right? Is to get through these things and show them your value. And sort of prove them wrong. And people were kind of taking this chorus of I'm still alive, like, hey, I'm still here, right? They were really like channeling this power through it. And Eddie Vedder said over time, rather than this, him screaming about this I'm still alive being this curse, he said the audience really changed the meaning for him. And it's as he put it, they broke the curse, right? But it really it changed, and I think that's pretty rare for a songwriter to say that the audience reaction to it completely changed how he felt about a song. But that was the case with Alive. So really famous song, and everybody gets into it, and obviously you could just scream out the refrain, but really interesting story behind it.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree. I have to imagine that's like a short list of we talk a lot about how people interpret songs and how often the artist will come back and be like, no, y'all, like that has nothing to do with what I was thinking about. It was just this.
Right.
But I think even rarer is for them to recognize like, oh, that is a cool interpretation. Like maybe that is one way to think about this and to have it be freeing instead of imprisoning. So I loved reading about that. I thought it was so interesting. And I, again, never would have guessed that that's how, I mean, my interpretation hearing it all these years was, yeah, it's like especially the way he sings it, like I'm still alive, like the way that hits, it's almost as if he's like, again, an achievement. I'm still here.
Yeah,
like I'm okay. Not this like agonizing, like, oh, I'm still here. And it's probably the use of the word alive. Like we never really think of the word alive as a negative connotation, but great song. Last minute of this song too is like my absolute favorite, like the drums and the guitar and all of that. It just checks that rock box for me. So really nice. But with that, let's move on to a new album here. So track 5, you go with Go on the album Verses.
Yeah, so 10 was such a massive hit, and that's the concern whenever a band has a massive hit album is what's the follow-up going to be. And I love this. I had forgotten how much I love this song, but this is the first track off of Verses. So not only do you get, okay, here's our second album, and it's going to be awesome too, but like just this first track, because we had included Once is the first song off of 10, and I put that on a best opening tracks mix that we had done. And so here, like Go, I think is also worthy of being on a mix like that because I just love the energy from this one. And I mean, it is just right in line with its title. I mean, it just makes you want to go.
Yeah, he like really ratcheted up the energy between these two albums. Like it is the intensity. It's so much harder of rock music. Like very, very grungy. You can tell like that grunge influence is hidden right around, it's like peaking around this time period. It's 1993. We were talking about interpretations of a song, and this one's made me laugh because everyone has kind of over the years interpreted this one to be about like an abusive relationship or, something really negative. But he apparently claims that it's just about his truck. He had a 1990 Toyota truck that he still drove. And it's apparently just about his relationship with his truck or his struggles with his truck. So who knows? you win some, you lose some, I guess.
And if you've ever had an old car and been in a hurry somewhere and you're trying to get it started, I think you could bring out the energy that he brings out here.
Yes.
Please don't go out
like,
on
go.
me. Yes.
Yeah. I need you to move. All right. Well, great pick, and yeah, absolutely love what they did with that opener. So track six, off of a, I believe, is this a different album? But
Still the same. I
it
think. I
is
think it's still
okay. It's still the
versus.
same album.
Yep.
Cool. So elderly woman behind the counter in a small town.
Yeah. So long title. Great song. A little quieter song than So Pearl Jam really fluctuates between the really quiet reflective songs and just the high energy rock songs, but this one's a little quieter. Um, he tells the story here about someone kind of returning to a small town, and the person at the counter recognizes this person, and but she doesn't think he recognizes her because time has changed us, even though maybe inside we think we look the same. We really don't on the outside to other people, especially if they haven't seen us in a while. And and just kind of these moments, and then they get reflective about where they are in life and all of that. So I love the story here. And even if you're not from like a small town, I feel like, your high school or your college or, some cohort you're a part of almost becomes that small town in a way for any one of us. And just seeing people after a while, I think not only makes you reflect about where they've been this entire time when they kind of re-enter the TV show of your life, but also, what you've been doing in the interim, right? And how much you've changed. So, yeah, just a great song. I think it just makes me think of kind of the passing of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, and I love what he's kind of says something that to me is kind of obvious once he said it, but it was still interesting. It's like people kind of either feel that they're the large fish in a small pond in a small town, or they feel stuck there and they like can't wait to leave. Or I think he might have even offered the third option, which is like, or they're just okay there. And it's like, yeah, like I think that kind of works out for any place, not a small town or not. But yeah, just kind of reflecting on exactly what you were saying. And I love this song. It's kind of funny. I'd noticed that it had a little heart next to it because I had heard this and I remembered what happened. It was like an autoplay song, and I was just like cleaning one day and, Siri put it on, and near the end, I was like, oh my God, I love this song. What is this song? And I told Siri to like add it to my library and like it so that I wouldn't lose it. And it was this song. Yeah. And I think it's because I just love the way that he sings at the end, hearts and thoughts, they fade away like over and over. And again, it speaks to like what you're talking about, how like things change over time. So hearts and thoughts, they fade. So things that, seemingly could have been really important to you at some point eventually are not. Things just change. Life has changed. So really beautiful song in that regard. All right, track 7. I believe this is the one that I was thinking about on a new album, and it is Corduroy.
Yeah, this is off the third album, Vitalogy. And so Corduroy, this is a pretty popular song. I think the line that all stands out to me here is, can't buy what I want because it's free. And I mean, he talks about, just over time, he says something like, whatever it is, like love or time itself. Like, you can't buy any of those things. And so I think at this point, when you think about where the band is at, now they're just this global, world famous band. And so I think this is an interestingly placed song with where they are in life, because they're still relatively young at this point. Like, this is still in the 90s when this song comes out. This is their third album. And I think probably getting a little bit reflective on like, they're kind of at the point where they can, materially buy whatever they want. And so I think this song kind of stands out just with where they are in life themselves, because there are those more important things that you just can't buy no matter how much money you have.
Yeah, I read it also. I was doing some research on it, of course, and he apparently wanted to write this song when he saw that someone was selling a $500 corduroy vest that was labeled the Pearl Jam Eddie Vedder corduroy shirt. And he saw this in a shop somewhere, and he was just like, "This is ridiculous!" What fame can do, and like how people try to like take that, and monetize it and all that kind of stuff. And I think that the first chorus he sings, "I don't want to take what you can give. I would rather starve than eat your bread." And I think he's just kind of, rejecting what people are trying to sell to him. And then to your point, instead he only wants the things that like money can't buy, and that's like what we should focus on, like all the intangible things that are hard to purchase. So yeah, a really powerful song again in that regard. And also just like, I love the interlude. There's an interlude in here where it gets kind of quiet and then builds back up. I'm a huge sucker for that. So absolutely loved it musically. Yeah, great track. All right. Track number 8, Better Man, off of the same album.
Yeah, so this one, maybe their biggest pop hit, and it's funny because they kind of refer to this as just a shameless pop song. But I think it kind of combines the two things that we've seen in the track so far, which is like you get the quieter sort of Eddie Vedder voice there at the beginning, and then this song kicks in and just turns into a full-on rock song. And so I think that combination is pretty cool, and it stands out amongst their tracks because of that. But I also think it's cool because he paints such a great picture here of this woman who is clearly not happy with her relationship, but, can't find a better man. So she's just kind of staying in it. And I think it's rare that you get a songwriter who can write from an opposing point of view, right? Like, obviously Eddie Vedder's not a woman, so he may have experienced this in his life, but certainly not from that perspective. So I think that's also a pretty good skill to have if you can sort of change perspectives like that.
Yeah, and apparently on top of that, he wrote this in high school. So this was a song that he chose to sing, having written it many years earlier, which I think is also incredible. We always talk a lot about talented people and what they're capable of doing, and here's this guy who's like, oh yeah, I wrote this song in high school, let me sing it and have it become a smash hit.
All right, what are we going to record next? Well, there's this song I wrote when I was 15, let's try it. And then it's a massive hit. It's like, how talented are you? Like, what is that? Yeah.
It's really incredible. But yeah, I think, anytime I hear a song about a relationship too, I just end up thinking about it as any form of relationship, not even between people, but it could be between you and your job, or you and your, how you spend your days, or whatever it might be, a family member. And yeah, sometimes we find ourselves stuck in a relationship that you kind of know you want to leave, but you just can't find something better. So you're just you feel stuck, you feel trapped. And that's like very much how I interpret this song, even outside of the confines of just like a romantic relationship. So very, very powerful song in that regard. And yeah, it makes me feel a little behind in life that he just wrote this when he was in high school. But here we are. It's all good. Let's move on to track 9. A really interesting one, and one that I've heard a lot on TikTok and Reels, and I can discuss that in a moment if you don't mention it. But Yellow Lead Better.
Yeah, I probably won't mention TikTok because I'm not familiar with this one from TikTok, but this was actually cut from the 10 album and was released later on. They played it on live shows forever, and then it was finally released on kind of this, B-sides compilation that they put out there. And so it kind of came, like, chronologically, it sort of came out later, although fans of the band were familiar with the song already. But it was written, the reason I talk about the timing is because it was written around the time of the 10 album, which was the original Gulf War at the beginning of the 90s. And this song is, the character in the song has a brother going off to war who is killed. And, he hears about this, he's torn up inside. But Eddie Vedder talks about how kind of outwardly he looks like they did at the time, which was like kind of this young sort of, long hair, kind of rock and roll-ish, whatever your stereotypical rock and roll kid might be, or alternative, grunge, that type of thing. Now he's going through something, and, he talks about, he sees people and he waves, but they won't wave back. And it's like, he's trying to relate to these other people who have lost folks in the war. But all people are seeing in them is this outward appearance. And I think from Jeremy all the way through, I think you could kind of see this, songwriting of, kind of a don't judge a book by its cover type thing. And just this, we've all got more going on inside of us than you know. And so sometimes, not necessarily judging exactly what your eyes see is pretty valuable. And I think that's what this song kind of hits on.
I love that interpretation. I think that, that's really powerful and a very important message, because we often jump to conclusions that other people, are only out to bother us. And it's like, no, they've got a lot of things going on. I'm sure, give them the benefit of the doubt. They might have something going on, same as you do. The reason I know this from TikTok and Instagram Reels is believe the opening verse is just kind of sung nonsensically. And so there's all these like memes about how people are, really feeling the lyrics here as they like drink a cup of coffee and like stare out their window. And it's essentially kind of nonsense sounding. It's really difficult to know what he's singing. And so I absolutely love that, that even when he's kind of like mumbling into the microphone, he's still producing great music.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Okay, home stretch here, last three tracks. And track number 10 is a more, relatively newer one from all of these, and it is Thumbing My Way.
Yeah, so I fast forward a little bit to include a few newer songs. So this one's from 2002, their album Riot Act. I like this one because, again, even though I love the energy they bring in so many other tracks, I also just like something that's a little lighter sometimes. Although, again, you read into the lyrics here, it's not as light as you think, but lighter sounding, I guess I should say. But, the lyric that stands out here is no matter how cold the winter, there's a springtime ahead. And, he has said this is about hitchhiking through a broken heart, is the way he kind of describes this. And so very literal, thumbing my way, reference to hitchhiking, but really great song.
Yeah, I also called out that line because it was one of my favorites because it's just so hopeful. And no matter how cold the winter, there's a springtime ahead. I really enjoy that, and I think it's important to think about that sometimes whenever you're going through a dark time or anything that's really challenging. Like things, going back, things change. So you just have to be hopeful that things change for the better and that there's something good on the horizon as long as you keep pushing. So yeah, really, really nice song. And I love the imagery here of, like you said, hitchhiking your way through a broken heart, which is always a really difficult thing to do. And I love the idea of it being hitchhiking because it's like, there's not necessarily a step, like there's not just a solid, okay, here's the course you're going to take when you're trying to get over a bad relationship. It's so haphazard. You may get in a car that leads you astray. It's like all these different things. I love the metaphor. I think it's so powerful. So really nice. Okay, this next one, we go even further into the future. So this is Just Breathe off of, I believe, Backspacer.
Yeah, 2009. This one got quite a bit of radio play, I think, when it came out, which, Pearl Jam just generally doesn't get a ton of radio play, especially a lot of their newer stuff. But this one did. I think when I was looking at, my notes here, if Black is about first relationships and the heartbreak there, I feel like this is about last relationships, because this very much kind of, thematically hits for me as like saying goodbye to someone, right? And saying goodbye to a loved one, possibly the love of your life, and just kind of, asking them to just keep breathing and stay with you, and sort of regretting not saying more loving words along the way, and all those things, but also being grateful at the same time. So, I mean, I just love this song, and I think the songwriting here is just perfect. But yeah, no, I mean, it's really kind of interesting that, Black is about 20 years prior to this, and he says it's about first relationships. And so when I hear this one, next to that one, I like, yeah, this is more that last relationship.
I love that. And yeah, I think I just love this song. I love that it's an acoustic song. Again, going back to his voice, it works so well, even on an acoustic track. It's absolutely beautiful. And so I really liked that you included something that was very different than all the rest in that regard, because it just shows, again, like the range that he's got, that it's not just like a, one trick pony type thing. And clearly not, right? They've had so many albums and a lot of commercial success. But it's just really cool to kind of hear whenever artists can also release an acoustic track that just is incredible and you just want to keep listening to it over and over again. And this certainly is that. I loved it. All right. The last track of the mix is just Eddie Vedder. So, I'm interested to hear your thinking on this one. And it is the track Far Behind.
Yeah, so Eddie Vedder's done quite a bit of solo work, and so I thought I would just highlight one track here. So I stole one track off the Pearl Jam mix to just kind of show, all right, Eddie Vedder on his own. This is from the movie soundtrack for Into the Wild, which I believe he was nominated for an Oscar for, one of the songs. But again, that movie is about, kind of a younger guy giving up everything and going on this journey, and that's... This song, I think, just hits that exactly, right? Just leaving things behind. He works with some really cool artists on this soundtrack, so it's definitely worth checking out the whole thing. But it is kind of a slightly different sound than just, Pearl Jam. But I think if you like Pearl Jam, this is a direction you can go, and right into Eddie Vedder's solo work that I think you'll love that as well.
Yeah, I loved that you included this. I wrote it's almost like an alt rock version of like Pearl Jam. Having him just do solo work here. Absolutely love the lyrics. I also think it's really appropriate as a closing mix, or as a closing song to this mix, because like you said, it's just all about kind of like leaving everything behind, like not containing yourself into a shape, and how sometimes having less is more. I love the second verse. Empty pockets will allow a greater sense of wealth. Why contain yourself like any other book on a shelf? Like, such powerful, empowering lyrics, and ones that I'm very excited to take with me. I feel like Pearl Jam has so many lyrics that you could just like put on a poster or write down and kind of be inspired by. And this certainly checks that box as well. So this was awesome. I love listening to this mix. I feel like I've been introduced to Pearl Jam. So thank you so much for spending the time to put this together for me. And hopefully all of you listeners, if you're not familiar with Pearl Jam, you've got like a pretty good base to start off with. And now you can feel a little bit more comfortable talking about them and knowing their history. And it was awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Oh, this was great. And it was really cool for me. It's like when we were trying to figure out a band that it would make sense for, like I said, they came about, when I was like 14. So I was like, I feel like I've kind of grown up with this band. So it's really interesting to see the evolution of their music. But so many songs that just brought me back to like high school and college, and songs I heard over and over again. And I will say, for people who maybe aren't as familiar with them, I will fully concede it's not like I was digging into the lyrics when I was 14 and knew like what even flow meant. To me, it was just, laughing about Adam Sandler just saying it was gibberish on Saturday Night Live. Like
Right.
Couldn't understand a word. But yeah, no, there's some great songwriting. Sometimes it's a little difficult to understand, but trust us, it's there. All right. Well, there you have it. Another super awesome mix for your collection. We've got plenty of mixes to do and plenty of more bands to introduce to each other. So we're looking forward to this series as well. But we'll get to work on that. And so for Samron, this is Matt, and we'll see you next time. Super Awesome Mix is brought to you by DLM. Make shopping easy with DLM, the one-stop shop for all your casual clothing needs. Shop DLMsupplyco.com and enter the promo code AWESOME at checkout to save 15% off your first purchase. That's DLMsupplyco.com.